So today we're talking about Gravity Zone Sandbox Analyzer on premise. What is a sandbox? Before going through deployment, let's explain a bit what the sandbox does. So the sandbox is the software virtual appliance which provides real-time behavior analysis of potentially malicious code. And it does that by providing a controlled environment for dynamic analysis of code execution, and it also provides a forensic report at the end of the analysis. The benefits for having a local sandbox analyzer is customers can use their existing hardware when deploying it. The detonation is done in machines that can actually replicate the customer's production environment, as opposed to the cloud one, which is more generic. It has integrated submission sensors for network, endpoint, and storage devices. And the samples are detonated in the customer's environment, so there's better in regards to data privacy, and the files are not submitted to our cloud servers. And also it has better forensics in case it finds something. Licensing is done separately, so this is an add-on that you can put to Gravity Zone on-premise, Elite, or Enterprise. And what the license key means is how many detonation machines you can have at the same time. The detonation machines mean the virtual images that are used by the sandbox analyzer to process those suspicious files or codes. And now, before we begin deployment, the minimum requirements for the ESXi hosts are version 6.5. The data store minimum version is also 5. SSH must be enabled in the startup policy. I'll show you in a minute. Also, the NTP service should be active and configured with the start and stop with host configuration as well. Now I have.
And what about hardware version?
Hardware.
Server there and so on.
It doesn't matter. It's all written in our installation guide, which I will provide after the meeting, and all minimum requirements, hardware specifications are mentioned in there.
Okay.
But these are the most important factors that I just showed you right now. And now I will create a VM. I've already downloaded the OVA files. My name will be Sandbox Analyzer, and it's in the data store. As well as here. No, it's not here anyway. I need to download them right now, sorry. We'll also take a look at the installation guide for the on-premises. The minimum requirements can be found here. So these are the hardware requirements. Now if I go to installing, Sandbox Analyzer, it will tell me that I can download them from my Gravity Zone console that I just deployed earlier. Let me log in again. Under the packages section, I have my Sandbox analyzer, as well as my network security virtual appliance. Let me make some space here.
Sorry, it's one control panel for Sandbox analyzer and network security appliance.
No, it's not. The network traffic security appliance analytics, the NTSA, has a separate console. So it's a separate appliance with a separate console, but they can be integrated. So you can send actions to this console.
Okay. Thank you.
Hi, Avram. Maybe it's worth adding a bit more clarification here because the network here can lead to some confusion. So we have a Sandbox analyzer, which is a product, and then NTSA, which is another product. And then we have a network security virtual appliance, which is not a product, but it is a sensor for a Sandbox analyzer. It is a network security virtual appliance, which you just saw on the screen. It's working at the network level, and it has the ability to capture content from network streams and figure out what content is suspicious in the network streams and automatically send that content to the Sandbox analyzer to be detonated. So for example, let's say you make an FTP transfer, then that appliance, which needs to be configured to point to the Sandbox analyzer, will automatically scan all FTP traffic and all the content that it finds there. If it's suspicious, it will send it automatically to the Sandbox to be detonated.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I was mentioning earlier that we need to make some checks of the host, the SXI host, and these are to make sure that the NTP server is set up and running, and also that the NTPD services, the NTP daemon services, and the SSH services are running. Now I've deployed my Sandbox analyzer. I will edit its settings as I don't have enough resources here. So my first network is the network that has 3 network adapters, the Sandbox analyzer. The first one is linked to the Gravity Zone console. So it's a way of communicating with the Gravity Zone console. The second adapter is for the internal network where the detonation machines will also be connected, and they will be using. And the third one is access to the internet in order to download its updates. In my case, it's the same as my first network, so that's why I.
Sorry, just a moment. Have you interface when the virtual machine can go to the internet for link or for upload to different parts of link and so on?
No, it doesn't upload. It only downloads updates and signatures and algorithms to detect suspicious activity for the detonation.
Okay, what about when the user can go to the link? Can the virtual machine can go for link by different interface or not?
You mean if a user can manually submit a file to the Sandbox?
Sandbox imitates the work of user and go to the link in the internet, and after that.
Yes, we have a setting in the Sandbox analyzer called DMZ hosts, so we can point to certain services and connect those virtual machines to certain internet parts, like Windows authentication service or others like that.
Okay, and have you private cloud? It's mean private base when different links, when different parts. So private cloud.
Yes. Of course, our cloud infrastructure is hosted in two places in the world, in US and Europe, and all of the content is private and is protected by GDPR rules.
Mm-hmm.
And it is compliant, yes.
Okay.
Maybe it's worth clarifying a little bit more the need of having a network interface card that is connected to the internet. So that network interface card that is connected to the internet will be used by the internal virtual machines where the samples will be detonated. And if such an interface is not provided or the detonation is done without internet access, then the detonation efficacy or will be greatly limited. And I'll give you a quick example. Let's say you detonate a malware which needs a command and control server to download its payload, its malicious payload.
Yes,
if you don't have internet connection, then that file will run, nothing will happen, and the response will be clean.
Yes, of course.
Obviously, we also have some options when you detonate samples to detonate the sample without internet connection. So when you send the sample, if that flag is toggled on, then the sandbox will not make any outgoing connections.
Okay, it's good. I know about this problem, but my question is about private cloud. When reputation bases, hashes, and so on are downloaded on server in the network of a customer, and after that, Sandbox go to this local server and not go to the cloud of vendor. Can we
okay.
do this architecture?
Yeah, unfortunately, the signatures, so signatures and updates are available only on the Bitdefender cloud infrastructure. So the sandbox will need to communicate with the Bitdefender cloud infrastructure and download this data locally from time to time.
And we can use local server, and on this server we can download reputation and so on.
Yes,
or not,
yes.
or only Bitdefender cloud.
So probably the question is more whether or not a relay can be used, or so the architecture that you're suggesting is not possible because we have a single mechanism, the single location for this update is the Bitdefender cloud. You could add a relay as an intermediary stop, as an intermediary point for downloading these updates. Yeah, like an update server here. You can have an update server which will handle this. So you can have, but this is not specific to Sandbox. This is specific to Gravity Zone.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Angel. I've continued with the deployment of the Sandbox analyzer, so I've powered it on. I've configured the network interfaces. You can configure them by using DHCP or static. Also, the communication server configuration is the communication of the gravity zone appliance. Now I'll use connection to the host, ESXi host.
So these settings here for the ESXi host are needed during the installation. The Sandbox will make a loopback connection to the ESXi host it runs into, and it will use that connection to deploy the virtual images that are needed for detonation. It will create basically the virtual machines, which will be part of the detonation platform. Now the anti-printing techniques here, which are by default. Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
About images, have you only Windows 10 and Windows 7 or not? Or
So
we can use different custom images?
So currently we support only Windows 7 and Windows 10. What do you have any other images in mind? Because we try to, like, which is the majority of, this covers the majority of the use cases we saw in a while. Most of the customers we talk to, they use either Windows 10 or some legacy ones use Windows 7.
Can the user do image myself, or he must go to you to do some custom image?
So the images here are all of them are custom. So the images are meant to be created by the end user, by the customers. That's the whole advantage of using a Sandbox on premise, because you can take a virtual image that you would normally use to deploy it in your infrastructure and feed that image to the Sandbox. And in that case, you're basically replicating the same environment that you have in your organization. You're replicating it as a detonation environment for the Sandbox.
Okay.
There are some settings around the images that I just quickly wanted to mention. The anti-fingerprinting techniques. Those are by default enabled. There's an option to disable them in case there's some software incompatibilities. The anti-fingerprint techniques are some technologies that are embedded in the Sandbox that prevent very specialized or very custom malware from detecting that it's running in a Sandbox environment and not activate. So those anti-fingerprint techniques like mimic a real environment running on a physical machine.
Okay.
Okay, now I continue with the installing of the network security appliance. I input the same address for the communication server as we did earlier. And now we'll be able to see it in our inventory here soon. And they're here. Start to be configured. The Sandbox analyzer the same. So the installation has begun, but it will take a while, especially since I have limited resources. However, you can now see it in the policy section. You can now choose to use a local sandbox analyzer instance. From here on, I think I can pass the presentation over to my colleague Angel if there is anything else to add for what he has said until now. Let me check if how I can offer him keyboard and mouse control. Okay.
Okay, seems to be working. Okay, thank you, Tiberius.
Welcome.
So to quickly go over the sandbox configuration, you will, if you are familiar with the SVA concept or SVA concept in Gravity Zone, the security virtual appliance configuration is pretty much the same concept. You will create a policy, send that policy to the sandbox analyzer, and that policy contains the configuration options. In the policy settings, you have here the sensors section. So sensors basically means various components that know how to filter content and send it to the sandbox. And that content can come from various sources depending on the sensor type. So if we're talking about an agent that is deployed on an endpoint like the best, we'll call that the endpoint sensor. And basically any file that is being seen by the best agent installed on that endpoint will go through a pre-filtering SDK. We call it a pre-filtering SDK, but it will go to some routines which will decide whether or not that content is suspicious enough to be sent to Sandbox to be detonated. And basically each sensor will have a section which will allow you to configure what type of content or file types can be sent to the sandbox.
Okay, just a moment, and I see about different application documents and so on. And I want to start with architecture of Sandbox. For example, we have a server with Bitdefender Sandbox, and how can we deploy this server? Can we monitor and email? Can we monitor and network without network sensor? For example, can we configure? Can we use anti-spam of CISC, Iron Port, or so on? And after that, we can use Sandbox. What's architecture of Bitdefender Sandbox without?
Okay, so what we have in Bitdefender, we developed with sensors which allow you to send content from different sources. So endpoint is one of them, network is another one. You mentioned email. So for email, we currently don't have a sensor which will plug into an email server and it would automatically submit scanned email to the sandbox. However, you could potentially use the sandbox APIs. So depending on the capabilities of that security server or anti-spam server you have there, perhaps you can write a script which consumes the Sandbox API and sends that content to the Bitdefender Sandbox using the Sandbox APIs.
And have you ready script for some anti-spam mail gateway, for example. In what mail gateway can you work now? Ready scripts for them.
So right now we don't have a script because there are many email gateways out there. What we have on the roadmap is the feature of developing our own MTA sensor, which can be integrated in an email gateway. We can potentially explore the possibility of developing a script for a particular gateway. We can look into that. That's possible.
Yes, until then we have email security gateway that actively acts as anti-spam, but that is it's a separate product. So it will be a discussion for another time.
If the customer not your email gateway and have own email gateway, how we can integrate with?
How we can integrate with their email gateway if they don't have Bitdefender?
Yes, they have not Bitdefender email gateway. They have own mail gateway, for example, Iron 4.
Okay. In that case, I don't understand why would he need the integration. Because if that acts as a gateway, it can act independently of our Sandbox solution. So, that does its part, and we protect what is inside the network, what passes the gateway itself.
No, but I think I understood the question. I think the question is, you have the email gateway, email flows into the gateway, and you want. And the problem is, how do we send suspicious email attachments directly to the sandbox to be detonated, right?
Okay, just a moment.
Yeah, it sounds about right. So integrate the security with our sandbox.
Yes, so I can tell you that right now our email security solution and our sandbox solution are not integrated. It's something that we plan to do in future. Regarding the scripts, there could be a possibility to have the customer's email security gateway and the Bitdefender sandbox integrated using the sandbox APIs, and this is something that needs to be explored and see how it can be done. Potentially we can look into this if we will know a vendor name and see what can be done. So there might be a solution in that direction.
And I see protection level is emails. What means it's archives, it's links from email. What means emails in this protection level?
So can you scroll up a little bit, Tiberio, because
You can scroll, okay.
Okay, a little bit. So the section, so these file types, applications, documents, scripts, archives, emails, refer to content. So basically, inside the endpoint sensor, basically the best agent, there's a small routine which looks at this type of files. So when I say emails, it looks at EML files, like files with extension EML, which are saved on the disk. It will look at these files, and depending on the aggressivity level or on the pre-filtering level, which can be permissive, normal, or aggressive, it will decide whether or not that particular file type should be sent to the sandbox. So applications basically means files with extension exe or com or bat, but not necessarily, because we don't look at the we don't decide whether or not a file is an application or email or document just by look at the extension. We look at the content, because we can have, for example, an executable which is hidden or under an JPEG extension, for example. and so on. So we look at the content, and depending on what content, depending on how we figure out what type of content is, we will categorize it based on its categories and send it to the sandbox to be analyzed. And this content pre-filtering, we call it pre-filtering because by adding this, by putting this screen in front of the sandbox, you're basically eliminating a lot of the stress on the sandbox. So not everything, not all the files will be sent to the sandbox, only the suspicious ones. So it's these settings allow you to juggle or to toggle between a high number of files that are being sent, with the downside of having lots of false positives, or sending less files.
Can I ask you? I see file type archives.
Archives,
and
yes.
Archives. Sandbox can open archives with password.
No, if archive is protected, we cannot crack the archive and automatically. So we cannot automatically open encrypted password, encrypted archives. The manual submission option has, if you go on the manual submission option here, you have the possibility of specifying a password which will be sent together with the archive and detonate the file.
Can we use indicator of compromission from different vendors in your decision?
In the case of what? Could you repeat, please?
Of compromission.
Of compromise.
Okay, IOCs. So basically, so right now this option does not exist, but yeah, so we don't have this option right now. But I don't see, technically speaking, why this would be an advantage, because I can tell you that internally the sandbox relies very little on indicator of compromise to determine whether or not a piece of content is malicious. The whole point of the sandbox is to let that malware run and then capture as many as possible details from running that malware, and then figure out whether or not it is suspicious.
And can your sandbox create indicator of compromission and get it for endpoint sensor, for example?
Yes. So I will, Tiberius, I'll send you quickly a report, a sample report.
Okay.
If you can open that file, so you can have a look at some of the. So yeah, so our report, so when you open a sandbox report, you'll see the indicators of compromise that are being created. They are available in various formats. You should have received a file. I just sent you with the sample report, like a very recent sample report.
Check.
Okay, so this is a sample report that is outputted by Sandbox. This is a very complex piece of malware that we run in our Sandbox. So if at the top we have different a small menu, graph, chronology, IOCs. So if you go on the IOC tab, you can see the IOCs that are created.
Oh, I see you support sticks and tags and so on.
Yes. This particular report does not have. We recently added the sticks as well. This currently report does not have it enabled.
And what about JSON, for example, for endpoint sensors? Can you support this format?
Which format? Sorry, could you repeat?
JSON.
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 So right now exporting the data in JSON format, I don't think it's possible because we try to go on the like standards, like Sandbox or stick standards. We can potentially add it in future. Yeah, so this is a sample report where you see what the malware did inside the sandbox, what kind of detections in the embedded technologies through screenshots regarding the sandbox, how the malware executed inside the machine.
What about knowledge base of malware, Mitre?
Mitre framework, yeah, this is it's mapped. So Mitre framework is mapped to Mitre framework. Also in the Gravity Zone interface, where there is a reporting interface in Gravity Zone. If you can switch back to Gravity Zone quickly. So if you go to Sandbox Analyzer menu on the left under System Status. Okay, Sandbox Analyzer. Okay, so you see we don't have any. So Sandbox Analyzer. Just click on Sandbox Analyzer. Okay, so this is basically the reporting interface. We don't have any detonations right now, any data submitted to a sandbox because it's a fresh installation. But as soon as you will have data submitted, you'll have the option to filter based on a couple of filters, and one of them on the right screen, right side of the screen, you can see attack techniques. So you will have the option to filter on the attack techniques that were detected on those in that malware.
Okay.
And you can also manually submit a file from the console. And more configurations. As you can see, this is still installing, so we're not going to be able to show how it detonates, unfortunately. Are there any other questions? Is there anything else to add?
Don't have question.
Can we use Yara rules in your sandbox? Can we create Yara rules?
No, so right now we don't support importing Yara rules in the sandbox.
And about architecture, can we support different proxy servers? For example, can we use ICAP for your sandbox?
Yeah, so you mentioned ICAP and I quickly said yeah. So ICAP can be used in two scenarios. You can use it as a storage scenario or proxy scenario. Right now we support ICAP in a storage scenario. If you have like a NetApp appliance or a storage appliance which has ICAP support, if you apply the storage license on Gravity Zone, you will have access to the ICAP sensor in Gravity Zone. So what this means is that you will have a possibility to deploy an ICAP sensor on your storage device, and that ICAP sensor will send through the ICAP protocol the content from the storage directly to the sandbox.
And what proxy servers, with what proxy servers are you working? For example, Blue Code and so on.
Yeah. So right now, so we don't have support for ICAP via a proxy server. We only have ICAP support only for storage.
Ah, okay.
So sending content from a proxy via ICAP protocol is not supported yet, only via storage.
And what different features have your Sandbox from different concurrents? What features very, very good from different concurrents?
So where the Bitdefender Sandbox stands better is on the detection part than detecting evasive malware. So that's where we are. We definitely are.
Different Sandbox use evaluation and erase technologies. It's not a feature by me.
Okay.
Are doing these parts. What interesting features can do Bitdefender Sandbox?
You mean what trying to understand your question? Are you asking what features we have better than the competition?
What interesting features can do Sandbox by different concurrents? What interesting parts in your...
Yes, what's better than the competition?
Yes.
The reporting interface, for example, the integration with the sensors, the fact that our Sandbox is integrated with various sensors from where you can submit content, like the endpoint sensor or the network sensor. The fact that we have this pre-filtering ability, we don't, if you put our Sandbox, you're not going to overload it with content because we have this pre-filtering, which sends only the essential data to the Sandbox. So what this means is that if you take the same amount of traffic, for example, or average number of files in the competition, because they don't have an endpoint sensor or because they're not coupled with the pre-filtering SDK, all the content needs to go to a Sandbox, and the Sandbox will detonate everything, and a very small percentage of what we detonate will be actually relevant. In Bitdefender case, we only send what is suspicious, and it's going to be what's going to be detonated is content that is more highly or more likely to be to malware.
And can we see in report visualization of attack or anomaly?
Yes, so that's another top feature is the richness of our reports. If you go back to the reports, you can see the, for example, you can go on the timeline and see how the attack unfolded, how processes were created, and even if you go on the graph, you can also see the files that are enabled and also get a different view of how each IOCs are interconnected. So another feature will be with the richness of our reports and the data we output there.
And what do you think about your competitors?
So in terms of competition, our project is behind a little bit some of the integration features. We're working on getting our product integrated with various other sources like email, so we lack integration with directly with the email gateway or getting email content detonated in our sandbox. But we compensate that with details in the report and with better detection.
Okay, and in projects, what competitors will be were in some projects, and whom do you see in competitors? And
okay, who is the competition? What are okay? So it depends. Last line is a competitor. Last line tends to target large enterprises and very large companies. Sandbox is maybe another vendor you'll meet a lot. They're a dedicated sandbox malware analysis company. They lack, so Sandbox, they lack the sensors integrations. Basically, with just a sandbox, it is not integrated with anything else. Another competitor could be hybrid analysis via CrowdStrike. Another one could be Symantec with their Blue Coat sandbox offering. But Symantec and Blue Coat also tends to target large enterprises, large companies.
Yes, but Russian market is very specific. For example, CrowdStrike, Symantec, Sandbox are not popular in Russia. In Russia, popular, for example, Trend Micro, FireEye, Fortinet, Checkpoint. What do you mean about these competitors?
Yeah. Some of these competitors do have some sandbox solutions. So for example, Fortinet, I know they have some dedicated appliances, hardware appliances. So the discussion here will be virtual appliance versus hardware appliance mostly. Pricing is also a very important factor as well. These competitors are for a longer time on the market, and probably their price structure is positioned differently. Yeah, so not sure if you have anything specific that
we don't have the specific information right now because we're not analyzing the competition regularly. So if you have any certain questions, maybe we can provide some insights in some time. Of course, if those questions come from your customers, we will take care of them right away, so we can see if we can fulfill their needs.
Okay, I want to ask different questions. In what? Just a moment. Just a moment. Who did you win of competitors in some on your projects? When some competitors are stayed in parallel. Or not, or you have not some projects.
So we have some ongoing projects right now. I know that there's some POCs going with Symantec Blue Coat, and I think we have closed a deal there. I don't have personally very much visibility on the deals being closed. I can get that information, and maybe we can follow up with this information.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, guys. If you have any more questions in mind, don't hesitate to. We'll talk via email. And I'm really glad you participated in our meeting today. Thank you all.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much.
I wish you
Thank
all
you.
a pleasant day and a great weekend.
Hello, everyone. Can I speak Russian with my colleagues? Дорогие коллеги из JITOV, скажите, вас точно